This is the good news. This is the last PowerPoint standing between you and lunch, so you can relax a little bit, get ready for it. So actually, the last speaker teed this one up really nicely for me, just as a complete coincidence. We're kind of talking today in this session a little bit about the way credential stuffing attacks, scraping attacks, these kind of automated activities impact on web applications, mobile APIs, the websites and services you're putting online for your customers, potentially, if you're running a business. So we're going to talk about the hidden danger of business logic attacks. And listening to some of the other speakers today, passwords has been a big theme, and there's all these problems. And effectively, only a few years ago, maybe when you heard of a breach in the news, and you thought, oh, thank God that's not my company, that's someone else's problem. Except now they've got a list of emails and passwords that they can use to breach your company. So someone else's breach rapidly becomes your problem. And I'm sure you've all seen the news over the last few weeks, years, months, whatever it is. There's always something in the news about another organization has been breached, passwords, credentials, information has been leaked, which is why we end up with these large online data sets attackers can use. And the way they're exploiting businesses and web applications isn't the thing that we traditionally think of in security. A lot of the time in security, we're thinking about pen testing, we're thinking about vulnerable software, we're thinking about remote code execution, technical exploits, the idea of Donald Trump says the 400-pound hacker in the bedroom, with the dark web and the flashing screens of text and all this sort of scary stuff going on. And actually, it could just be someone who's got a list of usernames and passwords and is sat there trying each one to see if it works on a particular website or service. So we're going to talk a little bit about the hidden dangers of this. And if we look at OWASP, who kind of write a lot of the standards around web application security and the frameworks and the testing you should be doing, they talk about the misuse of inherently valid functionality in a website. So the things you put on your website to make it easier for customers to do things, to find things, to buy things, to get information, to log into their accounts, can then be abused by attackers. Not anything particularly technical, not remote code execution, not open ports and vulnerability scanning, but just simply using your website in a way you perhaps hadn't intended it to happen. So why are we talking about bots? Well, let's start with what is a bot. So if we have a normal person, they have maybe the Chrome browser, they want to do a HTTP GET, they want to get information from a website. They go to a domain, it serves them information back. Fairly straightforward. The problem is that if we add a bit of script in there, something like Python, we can start to scale that up. We can automate that action very easily. There's lots of other frameworks out there, lots of other languages out there we can use, but the point is that one person can very quickly write something that can get not just one web page, but scrape all the web pages, capture all the information. Not just try one username and password, but try 1,000, 100,000, a million different combinations of username and password. And like we talked about earlier in the previous session, it only takes one to get through for that to be a success. So the costs are very low because you're just automating normal browsing activity. The company I work for, Netacea, based in Manchester, we do bot management. And these statistics are skewed towards us because we primarily deal with people who have recognized and know they have a bot problem. But what we see is 53% of the traffic visiting web applications, so 53% of the traffic going to websites, the resources you're paying to host in the cloud or on-premise are automated bots. Of that, 33% of those are malicious or unwanted. You can have good bots like search engines. You can have bad things like credential stuffing bots. And when we look at the retail and travel sector in particular, it gets really weird because 9 out of 10 log-in attempts to their systems are automated. That is not a real customer trying to log into their account. That is a bot. That is an automated threat. That is something trying to get in and extract information using those credential dumps that we've started seeing appearing online. So like I say, there's good bots out there. There's things like search engines. They might have uptime checkers to check your website is working. You might have security scanning tools that fire off and look through your website to see if there's anything untoward in there. You have partners who might actually legitimately use automated tools to gain information on pricing, on packages you're offering, and all sorts of different things. Or you might, if you're in retail or travel, want to appear in a price comparison site. You want to be there because it directs users to you because you have a competitive price. You might see this, again, as a bad thing. There was a case where Ryanair and Expedia went to court over this because anyway, they were scraping them. They were taking huge amounts of information from the Ryanair website to see what the up-to-date pricing was to compare it with other airlines. You might not want that to happen. That might be a drain on your resources. That might actually knock your website over and stop real customers accessing it during peak times. Trading seasons, Black Friday, things like that. Huge volumes of traffic from competitors trying to keep up with your pricing could actually impact the journey of your real users, stopping them buying things, goods, services. And then we've got the bad bots out there. Spinner bots, ticketing bots. These are interesting. So this is inventory hoarding, effectively, that we're talking about here, where they're going on a website, they're putting a ticket in a basket for an event, and then they're trying to sell it on a third-party site elsewhere. This is why when you add things to baskets, it often says you've only got 20 minutes to check out, because what they're doing there is zero risk. They've written a program that says, put as many tickets or items, high-value items, the latest iPhone in a basket, try and sell it somewhere else at a small profit. As soon as someone buys it, you click through the checkout process and check it out and sell it on to them. So from your point of view as a business, all your stock, all your tickets are in baskets. You can't sell those to other customers. You're holding them thinking someone is about to buy these, and then maybe that doesn't happen. Maybe that attacker isn't able to resell them elsewhere. So if you're an airline, if all the seats from your airplane appear to be booked out all the time, you can't sell them to real customers. And the attackers, if they don't manage to sell them, will just dump them at some point, by which point you've lost a real customer potentially. So inventory hoarding. Scraping, content harvesting. You might run a service, you might run a website. I was talking to a guy a little while ago at another event who worked for estate agents. And one of the problems they were facing was their website was being scraped. Someone was taking all their listings, posting them on a third-party site with adverts. And again, this is out of your control, so that could be for gambling, pornography, anything they want. But because of their search engine optimization was very good, when you were searching for property in the area, they were coming up first, and they were getting calls saying, I've seen this property on your website. And they were confused because, well, we haven't had any views on that, or this doesn't match up. And it turns out they were just taking all the information, posting it somewhere else, and then adding adverts to monetize it. If you work in print media, if you can take all the contents of the Times Online or someone else, place it somewhere else, and then put adverts alongside it, you can make money off someone else's content, someone else's intellectual property. Depending what you're doing, that can vary from a minor annoyance to actually a real threat to your business model. Account takeover, by far the most prevalent. Logging into accounts, and we'll get into this a little bit more in detail as to why that could be a problem for you, even if you're not someone who says, we're not a bank, we're not a large fintech, what's someone going to go after our accounts for? Well, there are reasons for that. Sneaker bots. Has anyone come across sneaker bots, by the way? These are fascinating. These are buying designer trainers and luxury goods online. So that can be a teenager in a bedroom who wants to buy the latest pair of trainers. They download some software to do this. They have access to a proxy network, a network of hundreds or thousands of different exit nodes they can come out of, and they're just firing almost like a DDoS attack at retailers' websites saying, as soon as those trainers become available, buy them for me. And it's really funny because this particular industry, it's actually driven by this trading market. There's sites like StockX who sell these, and they track them like stocks and shares because the value of these things goes up based on their scarcity. So people are competing for this. They're doing it like real-time trading. These people are saying, we will offer you a sneaker bot service that is hosted in a cloud data center that is within 1 millisecond of the retailer's cloud data center. They're trying to trade it on like small latencies that we can get you there with a millisecond advantage so you can buy those trainers before someone else. Interestingly, some of the ways retailers are fighting back against this, they'll put a listing up for one left shoe for £10,000 and bots will buy them. Because they don't realize, they don't read the text on it. It says, if you're a human, whatever you do, don't add this to the basket. The automated attacks just go through. But if you're on a shared platform or some shared hosting, this can impact everyone else using those same networks, just because some teenagers in a bedroom want to buy some ugly-looking shoes. Carding attacks, again, there's huge lists online of stolen credit card data. How do you validate this? Well, you find a site that offers the ability to pay by card. So if you go on a website, they have maybe a quick checkout where you can quickly add in some details, put in your card information. Well, an attacker can automate that and check out whether 1, 10, 100, 1,000 different credit cards are valid. Or in the worst case scenario, they only have partial credit card data. So they say they've got the number, they've got the expiry date, but they don't have the CV2 number off the back of it. Well, it's a 3-digit number. So I'll launch 1,000 different attempts to see if I can guess what that number is. If it says, yep, that card's valid, we can add that, then you know you've got a successful credit card there. It's a pain to you as a website because you're being bombarded with traffic, but then your payment gateway provider gets annoyed because you're being used to crack card details. You may then see sales going through that are fraudulent. They then have to do chargebacks. They then might say, we're going to cut you off because you're being a source of card fraud. They then might, at your next renewal, put up your fees because of that. So the impacts can be quite bad for you. And then we have things like this, and I appreciate at the back it's very hard to see. But this is the user agent of Googlebot. So when Googlebot visits your website to search it, to see, add you to the Google search indexes, they present themselves and they say, I am Googlebot. This is me. I'm not Chrome browser. I'm not Firefox. I am Googlebot. So you think that's good. And a lot of the technologies we have in place, the web application firewalls, the CDNs, the networks we have in place to protect our websites, will say, whatever you do, we need to whitelist Googlebot because it's a good thing. So in this case, the attackers just claim to be Googlebot. And when you look up the data center they're coming from, these are not Googlebot's data centers. These are not even Google data centers. They're coming from somewhere else. But time and time again, web analytics packages that you're using to drive decisions within your business are completely skewed. You're just going, why am I seeing 30% of my traffic coming from Google search bots? Well, it's not. That's a competitor scraping you. That's someone trying to do something else. In the most weird and wonderful cases you get, Googlebot should be just scraping your website, just getting content. And you start looking through your logs and you see Google's posting things to an account login page. Why is Google trying to log into something? Well, it's not. It's not Google. But we don't always have the tools and processes in place to pull that data out. So it can be very hard to tell good from bad sometimes with these things. And of course, when you're dealing with bots, you've got to be very careful for your business not to cut off the good bots that help promote your business, drive your business, but you also don't want to become a victim of an attack, so you're constantly stuck in the middle there. So why does it matter? Why do we care if someone else has been breached? We have a charity website that allows you to sign up for a basic package and say, well, I want to donate this much a month to the Cats Foundation. So why does it matter? Why am I worried about credential stuffing, account takeover? It's not going to be an issue to me. But if you think about it, an attacker starts off with an email and password list. That's all they have on someone. They have some information that's, this is their email, this is the password. Actually, these days, you probably find an email and about 10 to 20 different passwords associated with that user. So if they're using variants on a theme, you can sometimes work those out anyway. But we start off with that, and we credential stuff those against services. Now, we might go for common online services. If anyone here has a Spotify family plan, you're not using all the accounts, log in and check that that hasn't been compromised and that someone isn't reselling it. It does happen very frequently. But it's not always high-profile things like that. They can go after lower-value things. They can go after charities. They can go after anyone they want, because when they put those credentials in, if they're successful, the costs to them are very low of doing this, but maybe they can get a name out of your service. Maybe they can get an address. Maybe they can find out that you're paying £6 a month to the Cats League. So now, when they ring up your bank and say, I've forgotten my password, but this is my name, this is my address, this is my date of birth, and, oh, yeah, regular payment. Well, I pay this to this service and this to this service. That's suddenly going to help them commit fraud in your name. So you can suddenly be the source of breaches for other organizations. So it's not always about that you have high-value information, but it's about what the attackers can do, starting from an email and password list to build out, to start doing identity theft, to start doing fraud. Imagine you're a mobile operator, and someone just logs in and says, OK, when's their phone contract due for renewal? When's this service expire? And they then start phishing you. So they use this information to deliver a targeted phishing campaign. I ring you up and say, I see your mobile phone's about to renew. We can offer you this great deal. Just give me your credit card details, and away we go. All these kind of things lead to a bigger picture of fraud, of losses to you. And then you're named in this. Your business becomes part of this when the fraud investigation occurs of how they got in that sometimes. So sometimes people can end up with their names being dragged through the mud. And again, it's like the slide with Jared up there that we had earlier with Twitter on. It's often, the user has set up a known vulnerable username and password combination, but it then becomes your problem as a business. Cost of credentials. So one of the things that when I talk to people about this, there's often a misconception that it's all on the dark web. It's all elite cybercriminal forums with access to top secret lists of things. And I like to show people that those things do exist. There are definitely very sophisticated threat actors out there. But the barrier to entry into cybercrime and credential stuffing and account takeover, all these kind of things, is at an all-time low. It's becoming commoditized. It's becoming even easier to get. So how do we find some compromised credentials? Now, people will start telling me, oh, we do a phishing campaign. We do this sophisticated, malware campaign. We do all these things to harvest credentials. Or you go to Google. And you very carefully make sure you don't have Google image search on, and you Google check my dump. You then find a Twitter feed called Check My Dump, which is a robot someone's written that scans pastebin looking for fresh credential dumps. And what the threat actors do is, when they have a list of new credentials that are out there that have been compromised, they will post them on sites like Pastebin, small subsets, just as proof that they have good, valid credentials. So you can use a bot like this, and I've suddenly got lists of usernames and passwords for no cost to me. I've just simply Googled that. Thousands and thousands and thousands of passwords. Very easily, there's no cost to me. So the barrier has never been lower. And even if we want to just get started in cybercrime in general, we can look for the correct term. So we can look for combos lists, which is the slang for the usernames and password combinations. And we find the first thing that pops up is a YouTube tutorial on how to get fresh combo lists, how to arrange these, how to cleanse the data, how to make it more efficient to break into accounts on sites. So we've started off as cyber criminals. We've now got a list of usernames and passwords. We don't want to do this from our own IP, from our own computer, because we'll get caught out pretty quickly. So we go online, we look at some of the forums, Sentry MBA, or we go to proxy list. Suddenly we've got a list of proxy network nodes that we can use to exit from. So we're not coming out of our IP anymore. We can come out of hundreds or thousands of different locations all across the globe. Again, often you can get free services, free versions of this, right up to full paid anonymity, and we'll come on to that a bit later. But this is a really quick and easy way for someone to get hold of credentials, get hold of a network, and then we need a tool to do it. Now, you might think we'll have to write a script, we'll have to develop our own software, our own automation, this requires technical skills. No. You go to Sniper, this is not on the dark web, none of the things I've showed you are on the dark web so far, and this is account recovery made simple. This is a tool that's been sold specifically for credential stuffing. It comes with a modern UI, it comes with, as they describe it, insane live support. This thing has better UI and support than a lot of the security tools we as security professionals use day to day in our jobs. And for the price of $20 in Amazon gift cards, you can get hold of this software. If you don't want to pay $20, go on the Pirate Bay and get a cracked version for free. Be very careful if you decide to do that, because they're usually backdoored with ransomware as well. But if you have a virtual environment you can test it in, it's worth having a look. You fire up these tools, and the first thing you see, unless you're sat at the very back of the room, is a list of all the services out of the box that this thing can then test those usernames and passwords against. So effectively, you're just going to go in here and tick Netflix, League of Legends, VPN services, loyalty point schemes, Subway, all these kind of things. And these are pre-configured templates for taking usernames and password lists, putting them into websites, trying to test if they work, and then extracting information from those accounts. The ones on the top are the ones that come with a tool. The ones below are their community repository. People in their own forums contribute to this, and then you can set up custom ones yourself. So then it's very easy. We're just going to tick the services we want, tick the list of usernames and passwords we want, and this also has tools in for deduplicating data sets, so you can sort your credentials to make it as efficient as possible, and then we can launch an attack. And because these configs are designed to not only stuff information in, but they're designed to extract information back out, it runs very quickly. So in this case, it was checking 168 credentials per minute, using just over 1,000 proxies, and pretty quickly it's got 2 hits. And again, you can't see it from the back, but this is for an online streaming service, and it is telling you the username and password that worked, the packages that were available. So in this case, it's sports packages, so what those accounts have access to. So you can then take the list of known good accounts and resell those online. There's sites like Parade Shop that sell accounts for streaming services. They sell point schemes. Dunkin' Donuts, the donut shop, has been breached twice with credential stuffing attacks in the last year. Even they can't sugarcoat that one. Oh, nearly. One day that joke will work. So, when we're talking about this attack, we often think of our attack surface and our risk in terms of our main website. And this is where we're going wrong, because as we look at the configs that are in this thing, what we're seeing the attackers do is they're no longer targeting your front door of your main website where you're thinking, well, I'll put some JavaScript on there to detect whether they're a real user, or I'll server capture. They're going for the web apps, the mobile APIs, the things that you're using to allow a mobile app to talk to your service or a partner to talk to your service. So most of these we've tracked over time, transitioning from the main website, which is what we think of in the attack surface, to actually reverse engineering a mobile app and using that, because you've put a lot of security around maybe your main website, so they'll target the mobile app. They'll target the API. Or maybe if you look at things like open banking and these regulations we're moving towards with fintechs, they'll just use a third party. So if a third party application can talk to your API and get information about an account, then it doesn't matter what you've got on your website, they can start to use that to stuff credentials in. And we're seeing this more and more where you've got this sort of supply chain risk of you're opening up your services so people can access loyalty point schemes from 20 different retailers. Well, each one of those retailers is now a potential credential stuffing risk to you if you're holding the point scheme. So it becomes very difficult, and we're often just solely focused on the website. We forget about we're adding in all these functions, these new things in mobile and API. and the attackers just reverse engineer it, pretend to be the API, pretend to be the mobile app, pretend to be a legitimate partner, or they'll just go to the partner's sites and services and use those to attack you. So we've got to think of the risk holistically for all the services we're putting online. Here's a nice example. So we talked about this in terms of business logic. Logging into a website, accessing account information is inherently valid functionality that can be abused. But then we start to try and think, well, we're cleverer than the attackers. In this case, we think that every time they try to enter a username and password 5 times and get it wrong, we're going to block them for a quarter of an hour. If they do it again, we're going to bar them for 24 hours. I'm sure you've all come across this before, and you've been immensely frustrated when you've forgotten your password so many times and it goes, whoa, 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 slow down, wait 30 seconds, wait 5 minutes before you try that again. So it infuriates real users, and attackers dance around it. This is new account creation. So this is a website that allows you to create free accounts for free. So the attacker has written a script that has automated this, and you see these spikes here where they're creating new accounts that they know the username and password for because they've created them. So they try 4 combinations of usernames and passwords that they've got from a data set, and on the 5th one, they try one of the accounts that they've created, and that resets the limit again. So they never try things wrong 5 times, they do it 4 times, and then put in a known valid one. Even if they didn't want to do that, the blocks are usually focused on their IP or their user agent, so they can just use the proxy network to change it. But things like this, where the attackers have worked out how you're blocking them, reverse engineered your business logic, and are using it against you. And again, this is going to throw people all over the organization because your marketing team think, great, we've got all these new sign-ups. Why are they not doing anything? Why are we seeing an increase in fraud? What are all these things going wrong for us? So it can become a big problem. The traditional mitigations we put in place as well, block or limit. We've talked about the proxy networks. If you block someone and say, that's a bad IP address, we know that's someone trying to do something bad against our site, well, it's very cheap and easy to get another IP address, and thousands of IP addresses. We've seen the botnets, the Internet of Things, proxy networks, all these problems going out there. Capture. You know, you might think, well, we'll put a capture on our site. A lot of websites are reluctant to do this because it impacts on the user experience, and, you know, multi-factor authentication, absolutely a great thing to do to protect accounts, but when you start to add these in, it can impact on the user conversion rates and cause you problems. And in this case, captures, there's a service called 2Capture. For 50 cents, they will solve 1,000 captures using real people for you. So as an attacker, things like 2Capture, plug and play with those tools so you can automatically solve captures using a network of real humans in a country where labor is cheap enough that they can justify doing that. So it becomes very difficult for you. Or you start to do the user behavioral thing, which is the sort of more advanced solutions, and you'll see the Akamai's and Cloudflares of the world doing these things to try and detect whether a user is real, whether they're moving their mouse, whether they're typing in a normal way. It does offer some protection against basic bots, but they'll do things like they'll rotate to your API because you don't have as much protection there. Or they'll start to spoof user behavior. And because you're putting this JavaScript in the attacker's domain, you're sending it to them and saying, we want to check what fonts you have. We want to check you're a real user in a real browser. The attackers can reverse engineer that and spoof those signals back, so it becomes kind of difficult to do. So we need to really be careful about some of these things. The other thing with blocking is, every time you block or limit someone, they can just rotate and come out of a new IP, and you can end up DDoSing yourself, because if they've written their tool badly, it will just keep scaling against you to the size of their network that they have available. So you can end up trying to block users playing whack-a-mole and end up with a huge volume of requests coming to your site because the attacker can scale faster than you can block them. Here's a nice example. So this is what I call blame the Russians. It wasn't the Russians, but what happened at the start of a large-scale attack was this big spike here. All this traffic is coming from Russian data centers. So initially, the organization thought, we're under attack from a Russian data center. We're going to put some blocks in place. So you'll see it goes up very quickly and then gets shut down. And the organization think, great, we've done a hugely valuable service for the business here. We've blocked them. What they were actually doing with this was a decoy. They were working out what the rate limit was. So you might put a rate limit in your website to say, well, from certain geolocations or from a certain number of IPs or from an individual IP, we're going to limit the number of requests to a certain number. So you can't launch hugely volumetric attacks. So they worked out what the ceiling was, what you were automatically going to trigger and block them from, and then distributed it from lots of different countries, just staying under your rate limits. They never triggered it. So your traditional logs and alerting you have based on thresholds in your security center, they just duck under that. And it goes on long enough that nobody notices. They've run out of all the credentials to test. They're very happy with their results. And then it's only later when fraud starts to occur, someone looks back and goes, hang on, what was the problem here? So how are attackers doing this? And again, we might think of technical exploits. We might think of these botnets of compromised devices, Mirai, and all these scary things that are out there. Actually, it's a lot easier than that, usually, because there are commercial services that sell proxy networks. This case, Monkey Socks, with their wonderful website and branding. Key facts about them that don't seem suspicious at all. They offer anonymous proxies with no usage logs, no usage limits, and they're guaranteed to be whitelisted. So the IPs that they're offering you as part of their proxy network are not going to appear on any threat intelligence feeds. They are real domestic IP ranges in real countries. So you can say, I want IPs, my attack to only come from Manchester, or only from this mobile network in this city or this region of the UK. So it blends in with your normal traffic. The way they do these things is they build SDKs into mobile apps. So if you get a mobile app for free, you might have to pay for it to upgrade it. You might see adverts in it. Or increasingly, we're seeing people offering join a proxy network. Give over a portion of your resource, and you won't see any adverts. So it's a way of monetizing mobile apps and games. So suddenly, you're seeing attacks being launched against your website, your mobile apps, your APIs, from real customers' devices. So the same user, the same device, could at one point in the day be buying goods and services off you. Then later on, when they're not using this device, this mobile SDK kicks in and starts to route malicious traffic out of them. And there's lots of services like this built up for legitimate use cases like scraping, but some of them for less legitimate use cases as well. So it's really interesting and really worth being aware of that the concept of a threat intelligence feed of a good IP, a bad IP, you might be able to see some malicious data centers, but increasingly attackers are blending in with residential proxy networks, with residential capabilities, and even mobile. There was an event I was at quite recently where they were talking about they had a network of 7.5 million mobile IPs and around 35 million residential IPs globally. So you could choose pretty much any country in the world you wanted and launch things from legitimate, seeming IP ranges, not just DigitalOcean data centers that we see attacks from all the time. So, quick summary. The bot threat is increasing. We're seeing more and more sophisticated attacks. We're seeing more distributed attacks. We're seeing more and more low and slow things where people simply don't know this is happening in their traffic. They don't have visibility of what's going on in their web traffic. Question to you to think about is, do you have visibility? If you are an organization, how much can you trust the data in your analytics package? How much can you trust the fact that you know that those are all real users consuming your resources you're serving content to? And establish ownership. Often the bot problem, because it's not well known and it's not on an established risk register, because it's not a traditional cyber problem, falls between the cracks. The marketing team see skewed analytics. The DevOps and infrastructure team see resource costs going through the roof. The security and fraud team see breaches, but no one joins those dots up and says, actually, this is the overall problem to our business. It's costing us time, it's costing us resources, it's costing us in breaches and fraud that's going on. So it's really important to think about establishing ownership in your business. And building is better than blocking. I've kind of ripped through some of the things there around why blocks don't always work, some of the defenses there. Depending on your risk, they can be effective. If it's enough to deter an attacker, that's great. But actually, if you have anything of value, you need to start thinking of smarter ways. Using an intelligence feed to automatically reset customers' accounts as soon as they're involved in a credential stuffing attack. Before that fraud happens, be able to reset their account. Be able to serve multi-factor authentication or some additional password check or some account check just to those targeted accounts that you believe are being compromised or attacked. And actually being able to just serve alternate contents. If you're being scraped, if you know it's some competitor scraping you, you could tell them any information you want. And some people do have real fun with this, with giving their competitors wrong pricing information. So building this kind of intelligence into your web applications and into your development process is far more effective than just playing whack-a-mole at the perimeter with your CDN or with your WAF. It's not always the easiest thing to do, so you kind of do have that staging point where you go, we'll start by blocking, we'll start by serving caption, then we'll transition. But the more you can think about building bot intelligence into your processes, into your risk management, the better. Hopefully that makes sense. Hopefully you're all ready for lunch now. Yeah? So we're around upstairs now to see. We have a stand in the corner as you come through. Just turn back on yourself, say hello to the guys, say I sent you. I'll probably get a pat on the back for that. Thank you very much.